So, hello everybody, and welcome to another special edition of our Do One Thing Well webinar series. My name is Adam Corcoran, I'm the Technical Sales Engineer for Esri Ireland, and today's webinar is called Unlock the Power of 3D GIS. So, in this webinar, we'll be taking a look at different ways people leverage 3D capabilities on the Esri platform, some tips on how you go about rolling out 3D GIS in your organization, and of course we'll have demos of everything we covered today. And before I get asked this question, yes, the slides will be sent out. That's probably the most frequent question I get on these webinars. But also I have an extra special 3-dimensional gift to everybody who stays tuned until the end. So trust me, you're going to want to stick around for that. It's pretty cool if I do say so myself. Now, if you do go away from this webinar and create like an awesome 3D scene, all I humbly ask you is that you send me a screenshot. This firstly makes you look good, and secondly helps me convince my boss that these webinars are in fact a good thing and keep on doing them. And on that point, if there's any topics you'd like covered in the next while, please do leave me a comment below. Somewhere I can't see where you'd leave me a comment in GoToWebinar, but yeah, do get in touch. Now, before we dive right into all things 3D, it's that time of the webinar where I introduce our 60-second spotlight for the month. So every month we take a new feature, a cool new application, or a creative customer workflow, and we condense it down into 60 seconds. So these spotlights are intended to be resources for you, our customers, and hopefully gives insight not only into how you implement it in your organization, but also local use cases. So this month we're going to focus on Quick Capture, which is a brand new field collection app, and it does exactly what the name implies. It captures data quickly. It was originally designed for the express purpose of capturing data while driving along a route, hopefully when you're not in the driver's seat. Since then, it's been developed to be a kind of big button survey that can take photos. And already customers in Ireland have started using it to conduct, say, ecology surveys. Another is recording tree locations in an area. And an engineering company have been using it to collect data along a big enough infrastructure project they have. So I have a 5-minute tutorial on YouTube, which I'll send out with this webinar's material, but really great app that I'd highly recommend you check out when you get a chance. And here's a quick 60-second video of it. Oops, sorry. So that's Quick Capture. Again, like I'd highly recommend you check that out if you're rolling out mobile applications in your organization. But now let's get in to the reason why everyone's dialed in, and that is to see what all the fuss about 3D GIS is. And I suppose 3D is one of those trends we hear a lot about in GIS, and it exists in the same vein as, say, virtual reality, the Internet of Things, smart cities, and lately it's all about artificial intelligence and machine learning, all of which the Esri platform do have capabilities for, by the way. But all these concepts that your senior managers probably throw about all the time as buzzwords without actually knowing what they entail, right? So Jack Dangermond, he's the president, the founder of Esri, said last week at our annual user conference that GIS professionals, that you guys who have dialed in, are in a unique position in the sense that we can see what others can't. And I think that's a really great concept, because part of being a GIS professional is to make your data and analysis accessible to everyone who needs it. So whether you're designing a public-facing application or you're creating a web scene or a map for a project team, there's always that conversation of how easy to use your platform is, and you always have to have your end user in mind. So all this stuff about 3D, virtual reality, and machine learning is really just about opening up your data and making it as accessible as possible to your users. Well, at least that's my opinion. So it's, over the past 12 months, 3D GIS in particular is evolving quickly, and it's also changing expectations for things like public engagement and operational management and planning. So the main thing to consider is that a good 3D GIS, as we see in this slide, adds value to your existing 2D GIS by providing an immersive experience with new potentials for visualization. 3D GIS exists in tandem with your 2D GIS. So advances in 3D offer an exciting opportunity to adopt and present new ways of thinking about the ArcGIS platform. And it ultimately should complement how you're already planning, creating, implementing meaningful 2D maps and apps. Now, I really like this slide. It shows 2D GIS existing peacefully with your 3D visualizations. It's not a case of one over the other. It's perfectly possible to set up a workflow whereby a user opens up, say, Survey 123 or Collector or Quick Capture, right? They collect data that then gets pushed up into online or portal and sits within a 3D scene as a 3D object. And all this slide is showing us is that, 3D GIS can exist simultaneously with your 2D maps and apps, and depending on what you want to do with it. But one thing that you do need to know when it comes to anything 3D is this thing called level of detail, or LOD. Now, this is used as a standard throughout all 3D models, including all things Revit, AutoCAD, anything that really involves 3D modeling, you'll hear about LOD, or level of detail. And so what we have at the top here is the courses level. LOD0 is essentially a 2.5D digital terrain model over which you have an aerial image or a map. Now, LOD1 is the well-known building blocks model comprising of buildings with flat roof structures. And then in contrast, a building in LOD2 has differentiated roof structures and thematic boundary surfaces, so you can tell the difference between hedges, fences, and walls, for example. LOD3 then refers to architectural models with detailed wall and roof structures, potentially including doors and windows. LOD4 then just really completes an LOD3 model by adding interior structures for buildings. For example, buildings in LOD4 are composed of rooms, interior doors, stairs, pipework, and furniture. Now, there's always references to LOD5, but these mainly come from, say, gamer nerds obsessed with Assassin's Creed, right? But as you can probably guess, most 3D scenes consist of a mix of LODs, and that's not a bad thing. It just depends on what you want to show. So when I'm using 3D capabilities on the ArcGIS platform, typically I use 3 software packages. I use ArcGIS Pro, Drone to Map, and ArcGIS Online/Portal. 9 times out of 10, the stuff I do in Pro and Drone to Map end up in Online and Portal so that I can easily share what I've done with others. But just a note here for those using ArcMap, you probably played around a little with ArcScene that comes along with ArcMap, but in terms of 3D GIS, ArcGIS Pro compared to ArcScene is like comparing, say, Nathan Carter to Daniel O'Donnell, right? The difference is night and day. For my UK friends dialing in, that's the equivalent of, say, comparing Stormzy to Honey G or something, right? This is a judgment-free zone, but when it does come to 3D GIS and desktop, I'd wholeheartedly recommend using Pro over Scene. If you have a desktop entitlement, you can have Pro and Map on the same machine. Believe me, you'll save yourself a lot of headaches and lag time going with Pro instead of Scene. And probably don't even get me started on 32-bit globe, okay? But so, that's my take on ArcScene, okay? If you do have it, use Pro where possible. And if you have Drone to Map, use Drone to Map. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how you go about building a 3D GIS environment. I'm going to start spitballing here, okay? So I'll be hopping from Drone to Map to Pro to Online. So firstly, I'm going to take you through Drone to Map and see what 3D capabilities it has to offer. The latest version of Drone to Map has been rebuilt from the ground up on a modern framework that allows for a few new things, and it's powered by Pix 4D. The first thing that you'll notice is that there's a stronger user experience to make the move from 2D drone photos to 3D outputs as intuitive as possible. And this means an enhanced interface, more tools for processing and analyzing in 3D, and then even more improved options for sharing your drone outputs. So if I hop into drone to map, so as you can see, I have 4 different options for my projects. I can quickly create orthomosaics and DEMs in 2D, but I'm going to go ahead and create a 3D mapping project. I have some sample drone imagery for a random car park in County Kildare that I'm going to process into a point cloud. So what I'm doing here is specifying my images that I want to process, and I'm going to create this project now. You'll see that each drone image has X, Y, and Z coordinates. They're the coordinates and the height. First thing, what I'm going to do here though is change my base map. So I like world image clarity. It's pretty clear aerial base map. And when that's fully loaded, I can click on this new tab here called Flight Data. And click on Image Viewer. So now when I click on one of these points, I can see the image associated with it, and vice versa. If I click on an image, I can see the point. So this is where I'd add in ground control points as well if I had them. I also have different tabs here for edit and analysis. It's worth noting here that I have many different options for sharing as well, which we'll get into in a second. Really nice user interface here in the latest drone to map. If I go to home and options, I can export 3D PDFs, which look pretty slick, 3D DXFs for sharing with CAD technicians, and I have an option for 3D meshes as well. Really a lot of options. But for now, I think I'm just going to process, say, a last point cloud and a 3D PDF. When I'm happy enough, I'll hit OK, and then I'll hit Start. But in the spirit of all demos and TV cook shows, I have one prepared earlier, right? So I'm going to show you my 3D PDF. If I can find it. So the logos and titles can be edited, no problem. I left them as default. But I can pan and rotate my 3D mesh solely with PDF viewers like Adobe Acrobat as well. Now, if I open up the last point cloud that I generated and drawn to map in ArcGIS Pro, I can see by default it comes in symbolized by elevation, which doesn't really look great for visualization purposes. But the great thing about Pro is that I now have quite a few options when it comes to how I visualize my 3D data. So I can hit appearance, symbology, and I can draw using RGB, which is closer to what the car park actually looks like color-wise. And I have my symbol scale up the top right here. So I can make it as big as I want, or I can make it as small as I want. And it really depends on how dense your point cloud is. This point cloud in particular, it's only like about 21 drone images. So the point cloud isn't really dense. So I'm going to go with a medium scale. So that's my point cloud. It's geo-referenced. Processing time for this took about, I think, 3-4 minutes, just because it was only 21 images. But another cool thing, if I go to the View tab here, there's a new feature available in Pro is the Profile Viewing tool for 3D data. So I can specify a tract of my last file. And I can change the width if I want. I can change the depth. But when I'm happy enough with my tract, I can click this little green check mark if I can find it. And boom, so I have a profile view of my car park. Now, probably not the best symbology to use, so yeah, definitely not the best symbology to use. So I'm going to switch to elevation here to make it more meaningful. I'm going to zoom back out as well and just like bring that scale closer to minimum. And this profile tool can be used for all my 3D data, not just LAS files, right? So I can see my street lamp there. So pretty nice feature, I think, in Pro. Just to be able to see your 3D data in profile. Now I'm going to pull up an example of a 3D mesh from drone to map. And this is an abandoned building close to where I live. So just for the record, this is not where I live, it's close to it. But this building gives me the creeps every time I pass it, and my colleague thought it'd be a great idea to fly a drone. Like, you know, it's haunted. Again, not by me because I don't live there. But anyways, pretty good quality on these meshes. If you do have like a really powerful drone, you can make out the graffiti there as well. And the meshes will sit no problem on top of your existing GIS data. Now, if we go back into a map in Pro, I have two data sets loaded in here. One is OpenStreetMap building polygons. That is entirely open source and downloadable. I've clipped it to Dublin Docklands. And secondly is the National Planning Applications, again, a publicly available data set from ArcGIS Online. It has every planning application from 2010 onwards. You can see what's been approved and what's been rejected. And I could do a spatial join between the buildings here and these planning applications points, right? So that'll transfer all the info from the planning applications to my building outlines. And if I hit run, although I've done this process earlier, so I'm going to hit stop and convert this 2D view to a 3D view. You should just take all my 2D data, put it into 3D. Now I've changed the base map earlier to a dark one, extruded my building outlines, and then symbolized them by planning application status. So I can see what's been refused or what's been approved. I can zoom around, pan. But if I click on one of them, I get the planning application information for that building because of my spatial join. I can add in other buildings as well that don't have planning data too, just to build up my 3D scene. Again, this is just level of detail 1. If even, it's just building blocks. Right, so I can see the planning application there as well. Why it's been refused, and if there's any hyperlinks out to the ePlanning website. Again, publicly available data sets that I can just display differently, and I can add in just buildings that don't have any planning data behind it. Another cool thing I can do with ArcGIS Pro is drag and drop Revit models into my local scenes. I can switch on and off whatever layers I want. Ceilings, doors, roofs, who needs them, right? And I can see that happen in my scene. So like I can switch off different interiors. I can click on each structure as well, and that'll have information depending on how the Revit model was created. So if I click on this, okay, it's a lighting fixture, and I have different information. So really powerful stuff if like you're into maintenance as well. And if I want to push that up into online or portal, I can share as a web layer. Give it a name, summary, tags. But again, I've done that earlier, right? And this is what it looks like in online. So I also have this option to view by floor, right? So this is a new feature released in the last few weeks, and it does depend on how your Revit model is structured though. And so if I just get this up, so I can see different floors. Probably should have turned off the walls before I hit the floor picker. But really powerful piece of functionality for your Revit models now, particularly in ArcGIS Online. And don't forget as well, we have the slice tool, right, which allows you to see through your Revit model into the interior structures. You can rotate it, you can bring it up and down. Really useful if I did have pipeline or utility networks, right, that I could pop them in here and I could see them underground. Right, so like this Revit model I've just published as its one feature. So I'm going to switch tack a little bit here and talk about where I can find data to extrude in 3D. Right, so I'd highly recommend checking out data.gov.ie. This has tons of useful data sets, not only for GIS, and they have DAE files of the Dublin Docklands, but for our purposes, I want to put in some 3D trees into a scene. And I'm going to search trees here, and this is what they look like. So this is just coming from a CSV file with coordinates. And I've just symbolized them based on location. But I have an option here, right? So I can click on the marker. But I have this option here to symbolize based on attribute, right? So if I go back to my CSV, I can see common name. Okay, there's a lot of Norway maples. And I'm going to symbolize based on common name. And now I'm going to go into 3D types. And really great stuff about ArcGIS Online Update in June was that different markers have been added, right? So I have everything from infrastructure, right? I got my electricity meters, my power line poles, signs and signals. And these are all coming from, points, right? So I could have a point feature layer with all this information and just symbolize in 3D and make it a 3D object, all from a point that maybe comes from a CSV. But I have a vegetation option here as well. If I scroll down, you can see there's different types added in. So if I go, so they have Norway maple, right? So more realistic 3D scene. There it is there. So that's what a Norway maple looks like for those of you who don't know. And I can do the same for sycamore as well. Or like even this mountain ash. And so if I'm clicking on sycamore here, scroll down and let's see if they have it. They do not have it. God, who sells this software? They don't have sycamore, huh? Anyways, not to worry, I can choose something else. And I'm going to go back. Right, so really great stuff if you do have your trees, but I'm not going to waste your time, right, by symbolizing all these trees. I'm just going to go back and show location only. And choose a good looking Irish tree. Or one that looks like an Irish tree. Maybe this one. Nice one. Although that's 30 meters in height. Probably not the best. There we go. Okay, cool. I also have OpenStreetMap water bodies polygon. Again, totally free. And you'll see I have an option here. So I've symbolized it based on realistic water features. So if we just dig into this a little bit more and I go layer style, and I can see I have 2D polygons, 3D, but I have water here, right? And depending on what I want to show, oceans and seas might be better here. So we're in Clontarf in Dublin. And I can color this whatever I want, right? So maybe you want it red, I don't know. Again, this is not a judgment-free zone, right? You're perfectly free to do whatever you want. I can color it different, so blue, brown, whatever you want, right? Whatever takes your fancy. although brown might be a little bit more realistic if we get to like river, Liffey, and canal. So I have this option here, a really nice one, to specify what time of day it is as well. Okay, and I can see where the sun is, how it reflects as well. And this is an animated symbol here, right? So you can kind of see the waves moving around. I'm going to switch back to blue in case anybody rats me out to my boss, right? You show them the IRC is brown? What? Okay, so let's just pick a nice blue. Excellent. So now let's take a look. After I finish playing around with the daylight. So let's just set up my zoom here. So let's take a look at those building outlines, right? Again, I can click on layer style and I have the option to symbolize based on attribute. So layer style. And I'm going to go into type. Okay, so red is residential, looks like. Green is terrace. This is a school. And I can play around with the edges here as well and the labels. And what I'd always recommend if you do have new users going into 3D, always try and give them a label for a place mark just so they can orient themselves. Right, I have different options for the edges and I have different options for the labels as well. Right, so I can sketch it. And put on my labels. So there you go, community school, perfect. So we talked earlier about LODs and how scenes can like have multiple LODs happening at the same time. Now I want to show you what Dublin Docklands has, right? So it has a mix of Revit models, SketchUp models, DAE files, my OpenStreetMap building outlines, my water polygon, and some point features as well, dedicated as road signs. And this is what it looks like. So I can pan around, you can see I have my roof edges, and I've made use of the slides as well in Web Viewer, right? Web Scene Viewer. So I can click on Millennium Bridge. That's an object within itself. Still a bit of work to do differentiating the River Liffey with, the actual wall itself. And so I can click on an individual building. That'll give me information. If it's a Revit model, I can click on multiple. I can switch the base map, of course, depending on how heavy metal I want to go. So yeah, that's what 3D scenes look like, how they're created, and how you'd incorporate different types of 3D data into one scene. It's a really good example. Dublin Docklands, all publicly available data. But in terms of that, if you do have any questions for me or would like to get in touch, my email is acorcoran@esri-ireland.ie. And we'll be back soon with a webinar on mobile app integration, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Any questions you've asked during this webinar, I will respond to them. So yeah, if you do have any questions, drop me a note. I've had it with you all. Thanks for dialing in. and we'll be back again soon. Thank you.